Mash is a very powerful gym bro with no magic, living in a world where everyone has magic powers. In order to save his father's life, he enrolls in a magic academy, where he hopes to become the strongest magician that ever lived. All of these began with Mash lifting some weights in the woods. The dumbhead lies with his old father, Mash Burnedead. While Mash thinks about his son, Mash pulls out the door to get into the house. This scares the hell out of him, causing him to scream like a teen girl at a Justin Bieber concert. Seeing that it's just his son, he yells at him for ripping out the door. In Mash's defense, he states that he couldn't remember if he had to pull or push the door. Hearing him say this, Mash is surprised, since Mash has lived in that house all his life. He angrily continues to yell at Mash, and the latter eventually apologizes to his father, promising to fix the door. Trying to do so, Mash ends up destroying the door even further. This leaves Mash boiling in anger. Later that day, Mash is about to head out, and he instructs Mash not to leave the house or go into the city. However, immediately his father heads out, Mash wastes no time and runs straight to the city in search of some cream puffs. While walking through the street, he partially covers his face, and looking around he wonders why everyone is using magic for even the most basic things. Eventually, he arrives at a cream puff shop. When he offers the seller the coins for the puffs, he notices that they have been squeezed. This shocks him to his bones. Noticing this, Mash bends them back in shape. Seeing him do this freaks the seller out even more. Without wasting much time, he hands Mash his cream puff. Shortly after, the hood on his cape falls off, revealing that he has no mark on his face. Seeing this, everyone is surprised, since this signifies that he has no magic. While this happens, a magic police officer, Brad Coleman, pays attention to the news, where a young promising student is being talked about. Shortly after, Brad rises to take care of a prisoner he has tied and tortured. Just as he is about to continue, he gets informed about an unmarked human in the city. Meanwhile, Mash is still unaware of the situation he finds himself in. Just then, he is reminded of his father's words, telling him to never go into the city. While he apologizes in his mind, he doesn't regret coming since he got the cream puffs he came for. On his way, he mistakenly crashes into a chubby-looking police officer, who gets angry because his uniform has just been stained by Mash. Angrily, he starts ranting, and to ease his pain, Mash offers him a cream puff. This gets him even angrier, especially since Mash has just offered him a half-eaten cream puff out of pity. He slaps the cream puff out of his hands and goes ahead to start a fresh set of rants. Furthermore, he seeks to know what Mash would be doing about his stained uniform. In response, Mash rips the uniform apart, claiming that he would wash and return it to the officer. This gets the officer even angrier. In the middle of this, Brad arrives, feeling like a top G, and urges him to stop making a scene. Just as he is about to start asking questions, Mash arrives, swiftly grabbing Mash and running back to the forest. Watching this happen, Brad is pleased, since he thinks finishing this case would give him a chance to be promoted. He immediately sends a magic bird to go after them. On getting home, Mash yells at Mash for going to the city and ignoring his instructions. The pitiful Mash, seeing how angry his father is, apologies and promises to never do it again. Seeing him in this state, Mash finds it hard to still be mad at him. However, he orders him to repeat the morning's training routine as punishment. Before leaving, Mash hands his father the rest of the cream puffs he had bought earlier. After he leaves, Mash ponders on how much his son has grown into the opposite of what Heg thought an adolescent should be. They had lived in the forest to hide Mash from the rest of the world, but he worries that now that the magic police know about Mash, there could be trouble. Due to this, he ponders upon a possible solution. However, it's already too late, as Brad's bird has already found their location, and now he breaks into the house. At this moment, Mash had just finished the training routine and was heading back home to have some cream puffs. He is about to head in when he hears strange voices. At this time, Brad tries to torture Mash into telling him where Mash is. However, the oldie doesn't flinch. Remembering how challenging it was for him before he found Mash, he is more determined not to reveal Mash's location. Instead, he screams at the top of his voice, ordering Mash to run away. This causes Brad to figure out that the boy could be close by, so he orders his men to search the area. Just as they approach the door, Mash barges in and lands a silencing punch on one of them. Just then, the fatty officer from before approaches him, and Mash rips his uniform again. Before he could go on a ranting spree, Mash hands him a couple of slaps to shut him up. To finish this up himself, Brad conjures a powerful spell, which had been used to drive away a dragon previously, throwing it at Mash. Shockingly to everyone, including Mash, Mash shoves the spell off with a backhand slap. The shock seems more evident on Brad's face as he wonders if magic can be easily puffed like this. Just then, he launches another spell, powerful enough to destroy the entire area. As you'd expect, Mash shoves it off once again. Angrily, Brad throws multiple spells at him and Mash casually juggles them all, after which he uses one of them as a football to dribble the chubby officer, causing them to be more infuriated. Seeing his father's wand on the floor, he picks it up. This leaves Brad wondering if the boy could actually do magic. Immediately, he sets up a barrier to protect himself from any form of magic the boy would throw at him. However, Mash throws the wand at him, destroying the barrier and leaving a cut on his face. At this point, Brad accepts defeat. Having saved his father, Mash threatens Brad to leave his family alone or risk dying in his hands. In response, Brad suggests that they make a deal. He asks Mash to enroll in a magic school and work hard to be chosen as the best student, who would be referred to as the Divine Visionary. Hearing this, Regro urges his son not to take the deal, but Brad assures Mash that they will be hunted down for the rest of their lives if he refuses. Considering this, Mash accepts the deal against his father's wishes, but he assures his father that he is only doing so to make sure they get to live in peace again. Hearing this, Regro is proud of his son. Later on, Mash arrives at the school. He is met by an extremely difficult entrance examination. While the students hang around, the invigilator arrives in grand style. He introduces himself as Claude Lucci and instructs them to take their seats. Since there were no seats there, he shows off by using magic to create seats and writing materials, leaving the new intakes thrilled. All except Mash, who Claude notices. He decides to make the exam tough for him. The first test involved questions revolving around the paper with the use of magic. However, Mash finishes way before the 30 minutes allocated to them by ordering the revolving questions to stay put. When Mash submits, Claude is surprised that a student whom he thinks of as a slacker is doing this much. He becomes really furious and is prepared to make things more difficult for Mash. For the next test, he creates a very complex maze and instructs everyone to find their way out within 30 minutes. Mash sets out, but is interrupted by a young lady who asks if she can tag along with him. Seeing the damsel in distress, he accepts. However, she clearly becomes a distraction as she continues falling into traps. Due to this, he decides to ditch her. Not wanting this, she stops him with magic, binding his hands and legs together. Mash breaks free from her trap after finding out that she had deceived him for a selfish purpose. When he takes off, she gets attacked by a giant who seeks an answer to his riddles. Not having an answer, she falls on her knees and begs. He ignores her pleas and is about to attack her when Mash slides in, saving her sorry life. He punches the life out of the giant. With little time left, Mash and the girl break through the walls. Seeing this, Claude is shocked to his bones. Just before he could react to this, the headmaster, whose name is Master Wahlberg, appears. He beckons on everyone to be silent, as they will begin the final interview immediately. He also states that from that point on, he will take charge of the examination. To continue, he uses magic to teleport Mash into the interview room. There, the headmaster seeks to know why he chose the academy. In response, he states that it is to live in peace with his family. In order to teach him a lesson, the headmaster causes the room to transform into a stormy place. Even with this, Mash is calm. With how Mash handled this situation, the headmaster is convinced that he is a kind of person who possesses the capacity to assist others. After this, the headmaster apologizes for any inconvenience he must have caused to Mash. With the completion of the interview, Mash is welcomed into Easton Magic Academy. Later on, the new students attend their first class, as the professor teaches them one of the most basic spells, which is the lock-opening spell. After that, he instructs them to try it out. To the surprise of everyone, instead of casting the spell, Mash breaks the lock into two. This leaves the professor extremely infuriated. Meanwhile, a student who has been watching the whole scene is irritated by Mash's personality and wishes that he is never a roommate with that kind of person. However, things didn't turn out well for him when he checked out his room only to see that his new roommate is no one but Mash. Realizing this, he lets out a loud scream and introduces himself as Finn Ames. Amidst all this, the secret that Mash cannot use magic remains hidden to everyone except him. Instead of figuring out a way around this, he spends his time eating his favorite snack, cream puffs. While doing so, he remembers that they would be having a broom flying class the next day, and he surprisingly has no broom for the class. Upon realizing this, he asks Finn to lend him his broom. The next day, the students gather around for the broom class. While the teacher addresses them, she instructs them to channel magic energy into their brooms and command it to fly. As easy as this might sound, the students were unable to go through with even the first instruction as they found it hard to command their brooms to fly. Not wanting to be mocked, Mash channels his strength and steps powerfully on the ground, causing his broom to float into his hands. Then, in a sly move, he utters the word "fly." This act confuses the hell out of the students, who state that Mash just cheated since he already had the broom in his hand before he said "fly." Meanwhile, the other students have finally been able to float their brooms, so the teacher states that it is time to evaluate how fast they can go. Hearing this, one of the students, who clearly has a beef with Mash, challenges him to a race. Without thinking twice, Mash accepts the deal and the two get set to begin the race. The student, however, is very confident that he would win this race since he has been riding brooms since middle school. When the race begins, Mash leaves the student behind in extraordinary speed. This leaves him stunned beyond imagining. The teacher, on the other hand, is extremely surprised to see a new world record for broom racing being set. The other students claim they didn't even see Mash when he moved. Finn, however, had a good look and was able to see what really happened. He claims to have seen Mash throw the broom in the air immediately the race began and use his strength to raise himself on the broom, using air resistance to reduce his speed and mounting the broom in midair.
What?
Meanwhile, the student angrily states that Mash cheated. He intends to make a big deal out of this, but the top student in the school, named Cavill Lloyd, steps in. He asks to be friends with Mash and that they meet after school that day. This gets mixed reactions from the other students, who clearly know Cavill to be a bully. Later that day, Cavill meets with the student who had challenged Mash earlier, and we realize that the student had actually been sent by him. He punishes the dummy for messing up a task as simple as this. At that moment, Mash and Finn are walking past the hallway, and he asks Finn who Cavill is. In response, Finn reveals that Cavill is the son of a high-ranking member of the Bureau of Magic. And since the Bureau of Magic is absolute in the realm, Cavill possesses some authoritative powers amongst the other students. Having heard this after school, instead of going to meet Cavill like they had agreed, Mash spends his time in the kitchen making cream puffs. When he tastes them, he wishes his father was here with him to taste them too. Later on in class, Mash brings out his textbook to find out that it has been destroyed. While he wonders how, he assumes they are falling apart. Just then, Cavill comes to meet him, asking why he didn't come for their meetup. In response, he says he was making cream puffs. As much as this annoyed Cavill, he tried to keep a straight face. Hearing about Mash's dream to become a divine visionary, he offers to put in a good word for him to the vice principal if only Mash does as he says. For starters, Cavill orders him to do so many menial jobs. The next day in class, Mash brings out his textbook to see that it has once again been destroyed. This time, he asks Finn for his. Finn, however, gets scared and refuses, but eventually does so when Mash refers to him as a good friend. After that, Mash meets with Cavill and his two friends, and they make him clean water off the ground. While doing so, they all walk away, leaving him behind. In the midst of his latest chore, he feels Finn's textbook in his coat and decides to seek him out in order to return it. At this moment, Finn gets confronted by Cavill. This makes us realize that he is responsible for Mash's destroyed textbooks. However, all this had been on Cavill's orders. This time, Cavill orders him to burn Mash's uniforms, but feeling guilty about how he has treated Mash, Finn refuses to go ahead with this. This causes Cavill to smash Finn's head to the ground, using magic. At this point, Mash, who is still looking all around for Finn, finds his friend with his head on the ground and bleeding. In this state, Finn apologizes for what he had done. He says he decided to stop after Mash called him his friend. Cavill, on the other hand, is unbothered about this, stating that Finn owes him an apology and invites Mash for a meal with the vice principal. He assumes Mash would continue to be the dumb and gullible boy that he had thought he was. While talking, Mash walks towards him and grabs his hair, smashing his face to the ground.
Emotional damage!
Instead, he asks Cavill to apologize. While this is happening, the vice principal is just around the corner. He threatens to hold a school conference regarding the involvement of Finn and Mash in this violent incident. While the vice principal blabs on, Mash hurriedly kicks him in the face to shut him up. This gets him very angry as he threatens to expel Mash. Due to this, Mash digs up the ground and throws him. He lets the vice principal know that just as he can expel any student anytime, he can also be buried anytime. When the vice principal shows no remorse, Mash goes ahead with burying him, leaving him screaming loudly.